You wake to the sound of drums. Not the gentle, rhythmic thudding of festival music, but the sharp metallic thump of war drums echoing through stone courtyards. You're barely 10 years old, barefoot on a dirt floor in a small village near Kunming. And tonight, well, tonight, your life is about to be carved in half. Soldiers burst in before dawn, shouting in a language half familiar, dragging your father out by the hair and grabbing you by the arms. You're confused, sleepy, hungry. Then the pain comes. It starts with a blade, quick and merciless. You don't have a name for what they've done to you, only that the world now feels cold and hollow, like someone scooped out the sun. They throw you onto a cart with other boys, all wide-eyed and trembling. You try to remember your mother's lullabies, the warm scent of rice wine, but it's all fading behind you as the cart rattles through the mountains. You're on your way to Nanjing. You are now a eunuch, one of many to serve the Ming imperial court. The palace is enormous. You're thrown into a world of polished marble, jade staircases, and silence thick enough to choke on. And power. Oh, the power hums in the air like a low drumbeat beneath your feet. Everyone's bowing to someone else, eyes never meeting. You learn quickly, never speak unless asked, never walk faster than a senior, and never ever look directly at the emperor. But you're smart. Smarter than most. You notice patterns, you memorize faces, you learn the names of horses and the tastes of foreign spices by scent alone. You know who bribes whom. You learn to survive. And then, somehow, you thrive. One night, a man in gold robes calls you forward. He's not the emperor, not yet, but you can feel it in his voice, in the way everyone flinches when he talks. His name is Judi, Prince of Yan, and you've just caught his eye. You, he says, like you've been summoned from another world. What's your name? You tell him. Ma He. He frowns. Too soft, he mutters, too forgettable. Then he gives you a new name, Zheng He. Strong, sharp, like iron drawn across stone. From that moment on, you're no longer just a palace eunuch. You're his shadow, his eyes and ears. He sends you on missions to the north to spy, to bribe, to negotiate. You carry gold, letters, threats, all without flinching. Your loyalty is total. He is your emperor before he ever takes the throne. And take it he does. It's a bloodbath, honestly. Historians still debate whether Judi's claim to the throne was legitimate or a savage coup, but to you, it's destiny. The Forbidden City burns with ambition. The scholars cry treason, the armies cry triumph. And in the chaos, Zheng He, you, become more than a servant. You become indispensable. When the smoke clears and Judi becomes the Yongle emperor, he calls you to him once more. You've traveled far by land, he says. Now it's time you command the sea. You blink. You know ships. You've seen riverboats, fishing rafts. But what he's suggesting? Unheard of. He smiles. I want the world to know China's name. I want kings to bow. And I want you to lead the fleet. And just like that, you go from a boy torn from his village to the man who will command the largest armada the world has ever seen. Let that sink in for a second. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And hey, drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where we're all drifting off from tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get down to business tonight. Your life was ripped away before you could even understand what it meant. And now? You're about to command ships longer than football fields, carrying enough treasure to buy kingdoms, crewed by tens of thousands of men, all under your banner. Your name is Zheng He, and your journey has just begun. You don't sleep much anymore. Not with ship designs on your mind, not with spies whispering threats into the walls of the palace. You rise before dawn, pacing the wooden halls of the shipyards with a wax tablet in one hand and a headache in the other. They call you Grand Director of the Treasure Fleet now. Pretty glamorous title for someone supervising barrel counts and bamboo rope weaves. Still, it has a nice ring to it. Your crew is enormous. Sailors, soldiers, carpenters, doctors, cooks, translators, meteorologists, though they just say cloud readers. You learn everyone's name. Not all 27,000, but enough to make people think you might. That's the trick, really. Seeming like you know everything, even when you're barely hanging on by a thread of hemp rigging. But let's rewind. You're still young, barely into your 30s. Tall for a Chinese man, thick-set, and with a presence that makes people snap upright when you enter a room. One scholar describes you as imposing as a temple statue. Flattering, but you'd settle for not seasick. And speaking of seas, you're about to tame them. It's the Yongle Emperor's grand experiment. He's dreaming big, really big. While European ships are poking nervously along coastlines, your vessels are leviathans. The main treasure ships measure over 400 feet long, so massive some historians argue those numbers must be exaggerated. Still, archaeological digs in Nanjing found dry docks that could have supported monsters of that size. So who's to say? And they're not just big, they're beautiful. Carved dragon prows, crimson sails, painted hulls. Some carry troops, others horses, some nothing but silks, porcelain, lacquerware, and those tiny jade frogs the emperor insists on gifting to foreign kings. Every voyage is equal parts diplomacy, trade, espionage, and low-key flex. Your job? Make it all run on time. No pressure. You're not just managing logistics, you're managing jealousy. The mandarins, those Confucian scholars in starched robes, they despise you. A eunuch leading the emperor's most audacious project? It's an insult to the entire bureaucratic class. You can feel their eyes stabbing into your back like needles dipped in vinegar. One in particular, Minister Jin, keeps petitioning the court with flowery essays titled things like "Why Boats Are a Waste of Heaven's Mandate." You read them while soaking your feet in ginger water and throw them in the brazier. Still, you watch your back. Eunuchs rise fast and fall faster. One day, you meet with the emperor in private. He's pacing, rubbing a tiger-shaped worry stone between his fingers. "We need allies," he mutters. "Not just merchants, rulers, sultans, kings. People who will say China is the Middle Kingdom, the heart of the world." You nod. You understand. It's not about trade. It's about legitimacy. After seizing the throne in a coup, he wants the world to bow to him, not just out of fear, but respect. "And Zheng He," he adds, "bring back something impossible." You raise an eyebrow. "Like what?" He grins. "Surprise me." So now, on top of managing 12 squadrons of ocean-going ships, you're also responsible for finding something impossible. Great, but hey, you've got a talent for improvising. You turn your quarters into a planning hub, scrolls everywhere, routes to Java, intel on pirates, wind charts, a letter from a general warning you about malaria near Sumatra, pinned next to a drawing of a giraffe someone claims to have seen on the East African coast. You don't laugh, you just make a note. Bring a really big cage, just in case. Here's a fun fact. Your fleet even includes astrologers, not because you believe in horoscopes, but because your sailors do. They won't leave port without checking if Mercury is throwing a tantrum. You fake a cough. "Tell the stars to be nice next Tuesday. We sail with the tide." That night, as drums sound across the harbor, you stand on the deck of your flagship, the Starry Sea Dragon, and breathe in the scent of oiled wood, roasted garlic, and salt. Your officers wait. Thousands of men are already aboard. Torches light the water like a golden pathway. "Set sails," you say quietly. And just like that, China's greatest gamble creaks away from shore under a sky full of stars and secrets. What no one tells you about being a commander is how lonely it gets. You sleep light. Every sound at night sounds like betrayal. You don't even trust the tea unless you brew it yourself. Still, you find joy in small things. The ship's cook makes you fried lotus roots with chili paste. A boy from Fujian carves a perfect chess set out of whalebone. Someone catches a talking parrot in Palembang and teaches it to say Zheng He smells like fish. You do, but that's beside the point. The fleet is a city on the move. Markets, prayer circles, squabbles, love notes pass between ships via messenger pigeons. You learn to settle disputes before they catch fire, literally, because once they do. A fight breaks out on a supply barge. Stolen wine, jealous fists, a knocked-over lantern, and suddenly 3 ships are ablaze. You leap onto a lifeboat and order the line cutters. 2 vessels are saved. One sinks with 30 men inside. You don't sleep for 3 days. But you learn. And the fleet moves on. The world is watching now. You're no longer the boy from Yunnan. You're the man kings send envoys to. The sea is yours, the sky above neutral, and your ship, the dragon, glides through it like it owns the horizon. But deep inside, you still feel like that small boy on the ox cart, bleeding and terrified, hearing drums in the distance. Except now, they beat for you. The palace has gone quiet in your absence, but not in the comforting way of a home waiting for your return, more like the quiet of a trap waiting to spring. You feel it even before your boots hit the dock in Nanjing. Letters intercepted, budgets trimmed, guards reassigned. Enemies are tightening their nets. But back on your flagship, the air is different. The sun rises over the Yangtze like it's been painted just for your return. Crowds line the banks, craning their necks for a glimpse of the famous treasure ships. Your treasure ships, sails gleaming, decks stacked with goods. Porcelain, gold, ebony, sandalwood. But the real treasure isn't the cargo. It's the fact that every nation you visited now bows to the emperor's name. Sort of. See, here's the thing no one tells you about tribute missions. Sometimes it's a little staged. Like when the king of Java sent a gift of rare turtles and a gold fan, but only after your guards politely hinted that their village might catch fire otherwise. Diplomacy, after all, is just polite coercion with better tableware. The Yongle emperor is pleased. You bow, offering him a scroll handwritten by a South Indian king in Sanskrit. He hands it off without looking, eyes locked on something far stranger behind you. A giraffe. Yep, long neck, confused eyes, walking calmly down the stone pathway like it just teleported in from another planet. The creature's handler, a wiry Somali merchant, calls it a qilin, a mythical Chinese chimera said to appear during the reign of a wise ruler. You see the emperor's expression shift, just slightly. You brought him something impossible. He laughs. Zheng He, I told you to surprise me. You've outdone yourself. But even laughter doesn't drown out the protests. The Confucian court is fuming. They call your missions pointless theatrics. One scholar dares to say, out loud, that China should focus on farming, not far-off lands with strange animals and stranger gods. You're not surprised. The Mandarins believe China is the center of everything already. Why prove it? Why risk it? You don't argue. You just return to your ships and keep preparing for the next voyage. Meanwhile, the emperor has other ambitions. The capital is moving, literally, from Nanjing to Beijing. He wants a new forbidden city, one carved from marble, guarded by golden lions, bigger than anything seen before. And guess who's in charge of helping secure the trade routes for the materials? You, of course. The man who delivers miracles. Your fleet grows. So do the rumors. In India, merchants whisper about the ghost armada of the East. In Hormuz, pirates fear the dragon fleet that breathes fire. And in the Persian Gulf, they say the Chinese ships spit thunder and carry scrolls that summon storms. You do nothing to stop the myths. In fact, you encourage them. Fear, after all, is often more useful than cannonballs. But the sea never fears you. You learn that the hard way on the fourth voyage, somewhere off the coast of Malabar. A cyclone hits like the wrath of a forgotten god, waves taller than your mast, rain slicing sideways. You shout orders, lash down sails, pray silently to every ancestor you can remember. That night, you don't command an empire's pride. You cling to it, soaked and trembling, as the sea tries to swallow history whole. You lose 5 ships, but you survive. And you learn something about storms. They don't care about emperors. They don't care about eunuchs, titles, or fleets. They just are. Still, you press on, and with each port, your legend grows. You meet a Tamil prince who demands your shoes as tribute because they're made of Chinese silk. A rebel in Sumatra who challenges you to a wrestling match in the middle of a feast. You politely decline and send your cook to duel him with chili sauce instead. The cook wins. One of your men insists that a monkey from Calicut can read fortunes. You don't believe it, but you let the monkey stay anyway. It's good for morale. But beneath all the pomp and parade, something's shifting. The emperor grows older, more impatient. The voyages must go farther. The gifts must be more impressive. And you feel the burden mounting. Each time you dock, you find yourself staring a little longer at the ocean, wondering when the current will finally pull you in. Still, the world keeps opening its doors. You anchor in Malindi, where East African merchants greet you with incense and Turkish coffee. A local chieftain gifts you a zebra. You send it back with a smile, wondering if the emperor will mistake it for a striped horse. Probably. Historians still debate whether your journeys were more about trade or power projection. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just your way of staying useful in a world that discards men like you the moment they stop performing. Because let's not forget, you're a eunuch. You can rise higher than generals, but you'll never leave a bloodline. No sons, no dynasty. Your legacy must sail. And so it does. Every port, Every scroll, every banner, every giraffe, you stitch yourself into the sails of history, hoping the wind holds just a little longer. The shipyards never sleep. You'd think after sailing halfway around the known world multiple times, you'd be granted a rest. But no, the Emperor wants more. More ships, more gold, more everything. And you're the man who makes it happen. Again, this time, it's not just the fleet that's growing. It's your own legend. Children in ports from Sumatra to Mogadishu shout your name as you dock. Poets invent songs about your beard. You don't have one. Your battle axe. You prefer fans. And the time you tamed a sea dragon with your bare hands. That was actually a rotting log in a severe fever dream. But the truth is quieter, more complicated. You stand at the edge of a dry dock, wind pressing your robes back, watching carpenters work by torchlight. These new ships are sleeker, faster, fitted with reinforced rudders and detachable war platforms. You've learned from pirates. You've learned from storms. You've learned from your own nearly drowned body. Your fleet now has translators in 17 languages, elephant wranglers, Persian court musicians, Mongol archers, and Buddhist monks. You don't even blink when a Taoist priest shows up with a jar of crocodile tears. Claims it keeps typhoons away. You store it next to the cinnamon and shrug. At sea, you take your luck wherever you can find it. This voyage, your path curves west again, beyond India, toward the Arabian Sea. It starts calm, spices traded for copper, ceramics exchanged for lapis lazuli, a banquet in Cochin where a local sultan tries to marry you off to his cousin's daughter. You politely remind him you're logistically unavailable for such arrangements. Then you head north, and the wind turns mean. Crossing toward Hormuz, you're hit by another tempest. Not like the last. This one's personal. It moves unnaturally fast, like the sea wants to hurt you. Thunder cracks like bones breaking. One ship vanishes entirely, swallowed like a dumpling dropped into a boiling pot. And just when it seems like the ocean will win, your flagship holds. Barely. The main mast splits, but you don't. You survive. Again. But when you finally limp into Hormuz, burned sails, missing lifeboats, exhausted men, you find no comfort. You find politics. The port governor greets you with flattery so thick you could brick a wall with it. But behind his smile, you sense calculation. Traders argue over Chinese silk tariffs. An ambassador from a rival court questions the emperor's claim to divine rule. In the bazaar, someone calls you the eunuch emperor. You pretend not to hear. Still, your ships unload, your scribes take notes, and your guards watch the alleyways like hawks. Here, in the narrow, spice-scented lanes of the Gulf, diplomacy becomes a knife fight in slow motion. And then the real surprise. A delegation from Mecca. You never expected it. Pilgrims in white robes. They ask to speak with the great admiral. They want passage. Not tribute, not gold. Pilgrimage. You freeze. The Yongle emperor never mentioned this possibility. You're in Islamic territory now. You were born a Muslim long ago in a village you barely remember. You haven't recited a prayer in years. And now these men look at you like a brother. You agree. Quietly. Carefully. Historians still debate whether you actually visited Mecca or merely sent envoys. Some insist you knelt at the Kaaba in disguise. Others say it was just ceremonial respect, a nod across the sea. But something changes in you after this. You start carrying a small compass, not for navigation, but to find west, the direction of prayer. You start eating differently, thinking differently. And yet you remain who you are, the emperor's sword on water. The return journey is smoother, though not without hazards. You catch wind of a mutiny on one of the troop ships. Young officers complaining that they're sick of salt and sunburn. You board the vessel unannounced, walk the deck silently, and order the ringleader to serve as latrine cleaner for the remainder of the voyage. No one complains after that. Back in China, you present the emperor with new gifts, sapphires from Sri Lanka, rare medicines from Persia, a golden astrolabe from Baghdad, and a letter written in the flowing calligraphy of Arabic, which you translate yourself. The emperor raises an eyebrow. You've become reflective. You say nothing. But that night, while sipping ginger tea alone, you look at your compass again. West. You're starting to realize something. These voyages aren't just about making the world see China. They're about making China see the world. And you're right in the middle of it. An in-between. A bridge. You smile, gently. That night, a cook accidentally drops a whole jar of preserved starfruit onto the deck. You slip, fall flat. The crew roars with laughter. Even you. The ocean, as it turns out, isn't the dangerous part. It's court politics that'll kill you. You've been away again. Half a year of smooth winds, firm handshakes, and the usual mix of trade, tribute, and dramatic surprises. This time, a Raja gave you a ruby the size of a pigeon egg. A Somali merchant tried to sell you his cousin, politely declined. And somewhere near Aden, you swear you saw a whale that glowed in the dark. You didn't write it down. No one would believe you anyway. But back home, while you were charming foreign kings, the mandarins were sharpening their knives. They've been waiting. Your enemies in the imperial court have taken advantage of your long absences. Every cargo manifest you submit is now scrutinized. Every ship's log re-examined. Someone accuses you of inflating tribute numbers. Another whispers that you're hiding treasures for your own use. You're a eunuch, remember? You've got no bloodline to shield you. No sons to rally, just reputation, and even that can be snapped like bamboo. Still, you endure, and so does the emperor's ambition. One day, he calls you to his private garden. No attendants, no guards, just you, him, and a plate of oranges peeled so precisely you suspect they were carved with surgical knives. I want Sri Lanka, he says, not just gifts, obedience. You blink. That may require more than tea and porcelain. He nods. Then take what you need. And just like that, the treasure fleet is no longer just a flotilla of silk and goodwill, it's an army. It feels strange. You've always carried weapons aboard the ships, cannon, spears, bows, but mostly as insurance. Now you're being told to use them. Sri Lanka at the time is a fractious land, multiple rulers, layers of politics more tangled than fishing nets. When you arrive, one king welcomes you with fanfare, the other with swords. Diplomacy cracks fast. A local ruler, Alakeshvara, insults your envoy, then detains your men, then dares you to respond. So you do. You lead your troops inland through tangled jungle and humid death. Every step is a gamble. Tigers, snakes, disease, bad water. But you march, precise and silent, like a blade gliding through tall grass. The battle is sharp, brutal, and quick. Your soldiers, hardened by years at sea, fight like they've got thunder in their bones. The enemy flees. The king is captured. You do not execute him. You bring him back to China, alive. Historians still debate whether this was mercy, showmanship, or just smart politics. Either way, when the emperor sees the defeated king kneel in the court, he beams. This, he says, is why I send Zheng He. Not everyone's clapping, of course. The Confucian court is scandalized. Military action by a eunuch, overseas conquest, it offends every line of their dusty rulebooks. One particularly smug minister writes a 100-page document titled On the Inappropriateness of Naval Military Diplomacy in the South Seas. You use it to light your tea brazier on cold nights. Still, you're tired. Not just body tired, soul tired. You've spent years on the sea, chasing storms and dodging knives. The salt has crusted your bones. Your hands tremble some mornings. Not fear, just age. But there's no stopping now. Back on your flagship, you sit with a captured musician from Bengal. He plays a flute made from rosewood. The notes are soft, almost watery. You ask what the melody means. It's about a bird, he says, that flew so far from home it forgot its own song. You nod. You know that feeling. Sometimes, alone at night, you forget the names of your own brothers. Your native dialect slips away. You write a letter to an old schoolmate only to realize he died 20 years ago. But then someone brings you new scrolls from Arabia. One contains a map, a strange one. It shows lands far beyond where you've ever gone, curving continents, wide oceans, unknown islands. You tap the parchment just once. Next time, you whisper. Not because the emperor commanded it, because you have to see what's beyond. You order fresh sails. You're heading farther than ever before. The Indian Ocean no longer feels vast. It's a highway. You know its moods, its harbors, its liars and stormbringers. But beyond that, past the Horn of Africa, that's the edge of the map. That's where the wind stops whispering familiar names. And still, you go. The treasure fleet sets sail once more, hulls groaning with goods, decks humming with excitement. Every man on board knows something strange is coming. You can taste it in the air, like spice and rain. First stop, Calicut. You've been here before. The people remember you. A merchant greets you like an uncle. A boy runs up and gives you a folded drawing of a dragon on a boat. You stick it in your sleeve. Then onward, west. Days blur into nights. Storms nip at your sails, but none bite deep. And then one morning, the fleet rises over the horizon of East Africa. This is Malindi. It smells like charcoal, coffee, and promise. Traders from Egypt, Persia, and even Venice cluster around the docks. You walk ashore wearing robes of blue silk, a hat tipped low, and a polite smile that says, "Yes, I command an empire's navy. How can I help you?" But you're not here for trade. You're here for something different. The local king invites you to his court. He's tall, regal, and surprisingly fluent in Chinese. You talk through interpreters anyway, court formality, that sort of thing. He offers gifts: frankincense, lion skins, incense that smells like a dream someone else had. You offer porcelain, gold coins with the emperor's face, and a compass shaped like a turtle. And then he asks, "Would you like to see something unusual?" You raise an eyebrow. Cut to a courtyard filled with long legged, spotted creatures eating from bronze bowls. They blink slowly. One sneezes. A giraffe. No, two giraffes. You stifle a laugh. You've heard of them. You've seen one. But to see them in their homeland, so gentle, so absurdly tall, it makes you feel small in a way not even the ocean can. Your scribes sketch like mad. The crew stands in reverent silence. One sailor whispers, "Are they gods?" You shake your head. No, just very polite horses. You spend weeks in East Africa, Mombasa, Mogadishu, 1,000 marketplaces. You taste coffee brewed over open fires, listen to music that sounds like waves on wood. You exchange letters with Muslim scholars. Some ask about Confucius, others about military tactics. One man simply asks, "Do your stars speak the same as ours?" You don't know. But you give him a compass. Then you go farther, south. Historians still debate how far you really made it. Some say you reached Mozambique, some say you sailed around the Cape of Good Hope centuries before the Portuguese. And some whisper that your fleet vanished into waters unknown, charting phantom islands, meeting people who've since disappeared like breath on glass. Your logs from this journey? Fragmented. Many were lost, burned, or rewritten by bureaucrats later. But there is a story. A strange one. One morning, your fleet drifts into a bay where the water gleams green, not from algae, but from polished stones beneath the surface. The sailors refuse to drop anchor. A chill runs up your spine. A village of mud brick towers rises beyond the trees. Silent, empty. But smoke curls from one chimney. You go ashore. Inside the tallest house, you find a scroll. Not Chinese, not Arabic, not Persian, something else. Your interpreter stares at it and says, "I think it's written backwards." You bring it aboard, study it at night. But the winds shift and you move on. Was it real? Historians still debate that scroll, if it ever existed. Some claim it held the earliest mention of an island beyond the Atlantic. Others think it was a sailor's prank. You keep it hidden beneath your bed, wrapped in silk. You don't know what it means, but it feels important. Eventually you turn back. The sea grows rougher, as if it resents your ambition. One ship vanishes in fog, another loses its mast. You run low on fresh water. Two men go mad from sunstroke and start painting their faces with squid ink. You order extra rations, quiet music at night, jokes at meals. You tell the one about the pirate who mistook a cannon for a toilet. Everyone laughs. They've heard it before. Doesn't matter. Morale is everything at sea. Weeks later, you re-enter known waters. The sky looks familiar again. Birds trail your masts. You're almost home, but something in you stays behind, in those strange ports, those ghostly towers, that scroll wrapped in silence. You've gone beyond the edge of every map you've ever known. The court has changed. The buildings look the same. Red walls, curling roofs, golden dragons glaring down from corners, but something's different in the air. It smells like old tea and quiet threats. The Yongle Emperor is older now. His fire's still there, but it flickers. He doesn't walk as much. His meals are simpler. He doesn't laugh quite as often. Not even at your best stories, like the one about the sailor who trained a monkey to act as quartermaster. True story, by the way. Still, he receives you warmly. You kneel. Behind you, crates of ivory, coral beads, manuscripts in leather bindings, a rare type of pepper that makes your lips tingle like electricity, and, of course, the giraffe. The emperor leans forward, fascinated as ever, and mutters, "What a ridiculous-looking omen of good fortune." Then he looks at you. "Where else can you take us, Zheng He?" And you realize he's not just asking, he's hoping there's still more magic in the world to bring back. You smile. "There are rumors of islands beyond the sunrise." He nods, "Then you'll go." But the court? The court is sharpening its claws again. They're louder this time. The voyages are wasteful. Too expensive. The gods never told us to chase giraffes through the jungle. One bold official stands in court and says, China should build walls, not sails. You pretend not to hear. But later, you pass him in a corridor and offer a polite nod. He does not return it. Back at the docks, your men load supplies. Not with the cheer of earlier voyages, but with quiet purpose. They've seen too much to cheer easily now. The shipmasters approach you with concerns. The weather's shifting early this year. Some of the sails are rotting. We lost 5 carpenters to plague last month. You listen, nod, adjust, and continue, because that's what you do. One night, as you walk the dock in silence, you hear a young sailor strumming a lute and singing softly. You who have no sons, let the sea remember your name. You stop walking. That line sits in your chest like a stone wrapped in silk. You think of your village, long gone, of your family, names fading like fog, of the scroll tucked in your quarters, still unreadable. And then you think of your ships, scattered across the ocean like seeds. Maybe that's enough. Before dawn, you climb aboard the starry Sea Dragon. New sails, repainted hull, the same carved phoenix at the bow, and give the order to depart. Your 7th voyage begins. It is not like the others. The omens are strange, seabirds circling backward, a blue moon. One sailor claims he saw a dragon sleeping beneath the waves near Hainan Island. You tell him to drink more water and get some sun. But the sense of unease doesn't fade. A storm greets you in the Bay of Bengal, swift, violent, full of lightning that splits the sky like ripped parchment. Your fleet weathers it, barely. In Sri Lanka, old enemies watch you with wary eyes. You give them tea and silver coins and they bow, but their smiles feel carved. In Calicut, the Sultan's palace is quiet. The mood's different. More guards, fewer banquets. Word is, a Portuguese ship was spotted off the coast weeks ago. Your brows knit. New players are arriving. You press onward. Aden, Hormuz. The familiar ports greet you like a favorite shirt, comfortable but faded. But you know it's your last time here. Something inside you has begun to unravel. The sea that once thrilled you now feels endless. The stars look unfamiliar. Your dreams fill with towers made of salt and whispers you can't understand. One night, while sailing through the Arabian Sea, you sit alone on deck and write your will. Simple. No riches, no inheritance, just a request. If I die on this voyage, bury me at sea. Let the current carry my name. The next morning, you fold it, seal it, and give it to your first officer. He doesn't ask questions. By now, everyone knows. The admiral is dying. You hide it well, but you've stopped eating much. You cough when no one's looking. Your fingers shake when you hold a pen. The ocean seems to lean toward you like it's been waiting. Still, you keep the fleet moving. Because you always do. You're somewhere in the middle of the Indian Ocean when your body finally betrays you. It starts with a fever, quiet, creeping, like warm fingers brushing your spine. Then the aches, the dizziness. You try to hide it, of course. You've survived storms, mutinies, court schemes, and political backstabbing. You are Zheng He, the Iron Admiral. You do not get sick. But the sea doesn't care who you are. It keeps rolling beneath the hull like a giant breathing thing, indifferent to your pride. You spend your days hunched over maps, trying to study the wind patterns, charting alternate routes in case monsoons sweep in early. You tell your officers, just being cautious. They nod, but they can see it in your eyes. You're shrinking into your robes. You rest more than you walk. Your voice fades when you speak. And still, you lead. The fleet reaches Muscat, then Dhofar. You anchor for fresh water, trade for dried fruit, replace a few broken masts. A local merchant offers you a camel with gold-threaded reins. You wave him off. You're not collecting trophies anymore. You meet a young boy at one of the ports. He asks, wide-eyed, "Are you really the one who brought the giraffe to China?" You smile gently. "It walked more gracefully than I ever have." The boy grins, not understanding the weight behind your words. You get back on your ship with help from 2 guards. That night, you wake from a fever dream, choking, sweating, hearing drums again. But not war drums, ceremonial ones. The kind you heard the day you were taken from your village as a child. Your past loops in on itself like a rope knotting at both ends. The eunuch boy, the imperial envoy, the admiral of the seas, one body, one life, worn thin by salt and memory. You order the fleet to stay anchored for 2 days. The officers pretend not to know why. You sit in your cabin with the window open, letting the sea air sting your skin. You write letters to no one, and you begin packing your legacy. You call your first mate, a loyal man, quiet, smart. If I die, you say, you must return the fleet whole. He nods, jaw tight. You pull out a wrapped scroll, the strange one from that ghost village on the distant coast. Burn this, you whisper, or read it. I leave that choice to the future. He tucks it away, saying nothing. 2 days later, you collapse on deck. You wake in bed, the ship gently rocking, someone chanting nearby, one of the Muslim sailors reading a verse under his breath. The words fall like water. You ask to be left alone. You stare at the ceiling of your cabin and realize you have no grave waiting for you. No ancestral plot, no children to carry incense to your name. But the sea? The sea remembers. Every storm, every victory, every man you saved, everyone you lost. They're out there, floating, echoing in the wake your ships carved across the world. You call for your robe, the deep blue one, embroidered with phoenix feathers and gold thread. You ask for your hat, then sit upright, wincing. You look out the window one last time. Sunset. The sea shimmers pink and orange, like a silk scroll unrolling across the horizon. And then you let go. There's no grand gasp, no speech, just breath, leaving. When the crew finds you, you're still sitting up facing west. They honor your final command. They bury you at sea, wrapped in sailcloth. Lowered gently into the waves, no fanfare, no statues, just ripples, soft and endless. And the fleet? It sails on. Not because they want to, because they must. You built a machine that cannot stop. You are the tide now. A eunuch, a Muslim, a general, an admiral, a diplomat, a question wrapped in silk and salt. You have no tomb, but your grave is bigger than any emperor's. When the treasure fleet finally returns to China, the docks are silent. No crowds this time. No fireworks, no dragon dancers tumbling over one another. Just the steady thud of ropes hitting wood and the muffled shouts of sailors unloading crates. The news has traveled faster than the wind. Zheng He is dead. The court receives the fleet with lukewarm ceremony, bowing officials, a few perfunctory scrolls, the same old smiles that don't touch the eyes. You aren't there to dazzle anyone, and without you, the fleet feels unfinished, like a song cut off mid-verse. The Yongle Emperor, too, is gone. He died not long after your final departure, leaving behind a political vacuum that sucks the joy out of everything you worked for. His successor, the Hongxi Emperor, doesn't share his father's obsession with the sea. He's a landman, a taxman. Let's focus on the rice yields kind of emperor. Your scrolls are boxed. Your ships are docked. Your name, politely buried under bureaucratic reports. And yet, people remember. Your sailors speak of you in hushed tones around evening fires. Remember when he made that pirate captain cry? He once drank 5 bowls of chili broth without blinking. He told a parrot to shut up in 5 languages. Stories become legends. Legends become whispers. But there's one thing they all remember clearly. You kept the fleet together, even at the end. One day, years later, a group of junior officials opens the warehouse where the maps were stored. They find dozens of scrolls, sea charts drawn with impossible precision, trade logs from Mozambique, inventories of foreign spices, and strange geometric sketches no one understands. They're so advanced, some call them forgeries. Others say they're gifts from gods. Still others quietly burn the records to avoid challenging the official narrative that China never needed to look beyond its borders. Historians still debate how many of your logs were destroyed, rewritten, or hidden. But traces survive. A Buddhist temple in Nanjing adds a stela, a stone monument to its garden. It reads simply, the 3-jewel eunuch Admiral Zheng He, who rode the winds to the edges of the world. Tourists rarely notice it, but sailors leave offerings there. A polished shell, a tiny brass compass, a coin with your face scratched into it. The fleet itself is dismantled. One by one, your ships are taken apart for firewood, for scaffolding, for scrap. No one thinks to preserve them. China is retreating, turning inward. The oceans you once ruled are now silent again. And yet, echoes remain. A Chinese compass turns up in Kenya. A Ming porcelain bowl is unearthed in Yemen. Old men in coastal villages whisper stories of a great man from the east who arrived on ships larger than cities and spoke through translators with the voice of thunder and jasmine. Was it all real? Did one man truly lead tens of thousands across oceans again and again, not to conquer, but to connect? Did he really bring back giraffes, ride through cyclones, face down pirates, walk deserts in silk slippers? Yes and no. Because here's the truth. Your greatest legacy isn't the gold or the maps or the scrolls. It's the idea that the world is reachable, that there are no edges, only invitations, and that sometimes the ones who cannot leave children behind still leave something greater, a path, wider than any empire, longer than any reign. Years pass, decades, in fact. China forgets you. The treasure fleet becomes a rumor, and then a footnote, and then a blank space between dynasties. New emperors rise, build walls, raise taxes. They invest in land armies, irrigation systems, grain storage, not ships, not oceans. The shipyards in Nanjing rot away. Ivy strangles the beams. Rats inherit the slips where your vessels once stood, towering like floating palaces. The Ministry of Rights quietly eliminates foreign maritime missions. A few aging captains retire to coastal villages. They tell stories to no one in particular, about dragons on the sea, kings who wept when you left, and that one time you traded a box of tea for a trained tiger, briefly a ship mascot until it ate the cook's shoes. But the world doesn't stop moving. Across the oceans, another fleet is forming. This one sails under a different banner. Portuguese, then Spanish, then Dutch. They hug the coasts, map the same stars you used, and trace your routes in reverse. They claim to be the first, and without your records to contradict them, history starts to believe it. In Europe, they speak of Vasco da Gama like he was the first to reach India by sea. They credit Ferdinand Magellan with circling the globe. Your name? Lost in the folds of empire, until someone rediscovers a stele in a temple garden. And a sailor's journal buried beneath a collapsed storehouse, and a carved beam from a shipwreck near Java. Piece by piece, your story begins to resurface. In the 20th century, historians start whispering your name again. Zheng He, the admiral, the explorer, the eunuch who commanded the world's largest fleet. Modern scholars argue over the facts. Some say your ships were 120 meters long, with 9 masts and watertight bulkheads. Others scoff. Impossible, they say. Wooden ships that size would break apart. But what they can't argue with are the ports, dozens of them, all listing your visits. The scrolls from Malacca, the artifacts in East Africa, the songs in coastal villages that still speak of the bearded man with the dragon sails. Okay, maybe you didn't have a beard, but legends have their own priorities. You become a symbol again, not of conquest, but of connection. Of what happens when a nation looks outward and sees the world as something to learn from, not to fear. School children in China learn your name. So do children in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Kenya. In Nanjing, they build a museum in your honor, full of models of the treasure ships, faded maps under glass, and a reconstructed captain's cabin. The walls are lined with quotes. One stands out. Though I am a eunuch, I command 10,000 souls. Visitors pause at that one. You, cut off from lineage, family, future, somehow led more people than any general in history. That paradox lingers in the air like incense. One of the docents tells a story to tourists about how you would sit on the highest deck of the flagship at dawn, holding a cup of hot ginger tea, and whisper thanks to the sea for sparing you one more day. No one can prove it. Everyone believes it. And beyond the museum, beyond the textbooks and plaques, your true legacy sails on. In every ship that crosses a border, in every trader who shares a laugh with a stranger, in every captain who wakes at 2 a.m. to scan the stars and trust the compass. You are there, not as a ghost, but as a current, subtle, steady, unstoppable. Let's rewind. Back to that boy, the one who became you. It's easy to forget that before the flags, before the scrolls, before the dragons embroidered in gold, you were just a child. Mahe. Born in the highlands of Yunnan, Muslim, poor, curious. Your father used to tell you stories about the prophet's night journey, about jinn who lived in wells, about how the stars were holes poked in the sky by angels. You'd sit in the dirt and stare upward, wondering what it meant to go far. And then, soldiers came. Your village was burned in a campaign you didn't understand. The Ming had conquered Yunnan. Resistance was crushed. You were taken, just a boy, marched with other captives, heads shaved, names stripped, voices quiet. They castrated you. There's no way to soften that. It was brutal. Life-defining, erasing. But you didn't vanish. You learned. Languages, court etiquette, how to bow just enough to please but not grovel. How to read a man's eyes before he speaks. How to survive without letting bitterness rot your bones. Eventually, you rose, first as a servant, then as an imperial envoy, then as Zheng He, a name granted by the emperor himself. There's a moment they never record in the scrolls. Your first night alone in your own quarters at court. You lit a lamp, looked in the bronze mirror and whispered, "I am not dead." You meant it. And over time, that truth grew into something larger than you. That's what makes your story so hard to process. You weren't supposed to matter. And yet, you became the beating heart of the largest naval enterprise in ancient history. A eunuch with no family, leading tens of thousands. A Muslim serving a Confucian court. A foreigner born on China's frontier who came to represent it to the world. You were a contradiction the empire didn't know how to handle, so after you died, they erased you. Too dangerous to remember, too powerful to forget. But the world has a long memory. Centuries later, when astronauts orbit Earth and look down, they see blue, oceans more than land, and somewhere below, along forgotten shipping routes, the currents you once sailed still swirl. Today, a cargo ship passes through the Strait of Malacca. The crew drinks bottled tea, their GPS glows. They have no idea who you were, and yet they sail in your wake. In a port in Kenya, a child selling wooden giraffes asks a tourist, "Do you know the name Zheng He?" The tourist shrugs, but maybe, they'll look it up later. Maybe they'll find the stone stele, the cracked scroll, the name carved in the ledger of impossible lives. Let's talk about legacy, not the kind carved in marble or printed on banknotes, the kind that slips between the lines of history books, the soft, stubborn legacy that lingers even when no one's looking. Yours is that kind, because, officially, after your final voyage, the treasure fleet was decommissioned, disbanded, forgotten. But unofficially, the world changed. The ports you visited didn't forget you. You weren't just a passing pageantry of gold and banners. You forged bonds, marriage alliances, trade agreements, spiritual exchanges. You brought Chinese medicine to the Horn of Africa. You brought Persian astrology back to Nanjing. You introduced tropical hardwoods to inland artisans who had never seen such color in grain. Cultural diffusion, mutual curiosity, the kind of soft diplomacy no sword could manage. And even in your absence, your sailors stayed. Some deserted. Some settled. Others married into local communities, trading jade for coral, porcelain for camels. They whispered your name under the stars, carved it on driftwood, stitched it into family stories. In Malacca, they still talk about you. In Calicut, they hold up your visit as the golden age of commerce. In East Africa, some oral traditions still refer to a sea emperor who came from the rising sun and taught kings to count the stars. You, Zheng He, the eunuch who had no children, left a family scattered across continents. You're not in the records, you're in the blood. Meanwhile, back in China, the bureaucracy tightens. The imperial edict goes out. All records of the treasure fleet must be sealed, edited, or destroyed. Your maps, locked away. Your ships, disassembled. Your sailors, dispersed. Why? Because you were too successful. You proved China could stretch its fingers across the world. And that terrified people who preferred it curled into a fist. So they rewrote the story. We were always land-focused, they claimed. We never wanted the sea. But the sea remembers. One day, centuries later, a fisherman in Vietnam hauls up a strange artifact, a Chinese compass, etched with a phrase in Persian. It shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be possible. But it does, and it is. They send it to a museum. It gets filed away, forgotten, and found again. It's always like that. Your legacy hides in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to ask what really happened. And when they dig, they find your shadow stretching farther than they expected, not just across oceans, but across time. You weren't just an admiral, you were a mirror to what the world could be when it sails toward understanding instead of conquest. That's the real legacy. Not the giraffes, not the stele, not even the ships, but the possibility that a man born poor, enslaved, and reshaped by violence could command the sea and still choose not to dominate, but to connect. That's your true empire. Sometimes, late at night, the sailors would say you had a map in your blood, that your veins ran with ocean water, that you could sniff the wind and tell which continent it had passed over last. You let them believe it. It was better than the truth. You read more, listened better, and learned faster than anyone else in the room. The ocean didn't love you. You earned its respect. And now, long after your death, stories about you ripple outward like the wake of your ships. A teacher in Zanzibar tells his students about the time a Chinese admiral helped unite feuding sultans by gifting them a single bronze mirror, forcing them to see themselves before signing peace. That story may not be true, or maybe it's truer than the facts. In Sri Lanka, a shrine stands on a cliff edge, wind-whipped and sunburnt, dedicated to a foreign warrior who fought with honor and vanished into the sea. No name on the stone, but everyone knows. In China, a student walks past your statue at a harbor in Nanjing. She pauses, reads the inscription, Zheng He, Admiral of the Western Seas. She asks her grandmother about you. Her grandmother shrugs, some sailor, I think, with big boats. But something about your eyes, etched in bronze, squinting into imagined sunlight, stays with her. Later that night, she'll look you up and find more than she expected. What will she find? Yes. A Muslim? Yes. A naval commander? Absolutely. But also a diplomat who carried more gifts than weapons, a scholar who asked questions in 5 languages, a survivor of pain who never stopped sailing forward. And maybe she'll wonder, how did he do all that? How did someone with no lineage, no heirs, no royal blood become the beating heart of an empire's wildest dreams? Simple. You never tried to own the ocean. You just listened to it, and you brought its stories back. That's what made you different from the ones who came later. The conquistadors, the privateers, the map makers who drew the world with knives instead of brushes. You weren't claiming, you were connecting. That's why the people you met, those kings, monks, traders, and fishermen, didn't see you as an invader. They saw you as a guest worth remembering. Historians still argue over what to call you: explorer, admiral, ambassador? But the truth is simpler. You were a good visitor in a world full of conquerors. And maybe that's what the world needs more of. By the time the 15th century draws to a close, the treasure fleet is a ghost. The great docks at Longjiang sit empty. The cranes rust. The slipways, once alive with the thunder of timbers and the bark of orders in 6 languages, are quiet. Ivy grows where anchors once clanged. In the Forbidden City, your name is spoken less and less. First by accident, then on purpose. The new emperors are different, conservative, inland-focused. They look at the ocean not as a road, but as a threat. They double down on the Great Wall. They shift budgets from shipbuilding to grain silos. And slowly, China's gaze turns inward. Foreign embassies that once arrived with elephants and rubies are turned away. The Silk Road shrinks. The maritime world moves on, without you. But not everyone forgets. Far from the capitals and courtiers, your sailors, those who survived, scatter across the ports of the world. Some settle in Java, some in India, some in Mombasa. A few return home and fade into their villages, carrying stories too large for the rice paddies. They tell their grandchildren about you. Not the emperor, not the court. You, the man who rode waves like a stallion. The man who brought peace through presence. The man who sailed farther than anyone before and chose not to conquer. One sailor, now gray and near blind, carves your likeness into a chunk of driftwood and sets it afloat. No one knows what happened to it. Maybe it sank. Maybe it drifted west for 1,000 miles and was mistaken for a god on some forgotten island. That feels about right. Elsewhere, European maps begin to appear. They show Africa, India, the Americas, all discovered recently, they claim. Your name is nowhere, but the routes, the currents, the waypoints, they're the same. You paved the ocean's arteries. They just changed the plaques. And yet, somewhere, deep down in the wooden ribs of every ship that dares to cross a horizon, there's a beat that sounds like your footsteps on the deck. Steady, measured, curious. There's one final legend told in bits and pieces across Southeast Asia. It goes like this. A sailor, caught in a storm, prays for rescue. As his boat founders, a massive shadow passes beneath the waves. A mast appears, then another, then 10 more. A voice calls out, not in any language the sailor knows, but in one he understands. Follow the stars. They've always been yours. When he wakes, he's on calm water, his compass pointing true. That's your afterlife. Not in a heaven above, but in the sea itself. Your soul became current, your spirit became wind, and long after stone erodes and ink fades, a voice still whispers through the rigging, go, see what's out there. Be better than the last man. That was always your message. Even now, it echoes across the waves. Word count, you never built a monument to yourself. No bronze statue, no golden tomb, no giant mural in the Hall of Supreme whatever. All you ever left behind were stories and ships. And ships don't last. But stories get retold by dockhands in Zanzibar, by traders on the Mekong, by kids in Nanjing skipping stones and pretending their pebbles are treasure ships bound for the ends of the world. They say that when you spoke, it was slow, measured, like someone who knew how to wait for tides. They say you never yelled, just raised an eyebrow, and the whole deck went silent. They say you could fix a mast with one hand and calm a panicked elephant with the other. Probably exaggerated, but probably not by much. You weren't flawless. You made hard calls. You took sides. You played politics when you had to. You captured a king, maybe even sank a few ships that didn't deserve it, but you also spared thousands, gave more than you took, and when offered the power to take more, you turned it into invitation instead of empire. That's what makes your voyages strange in the eyes of history, because they don't fit the pattern. No conquest, no colonization, no burning cities, no piles of gold guarded by blood, just sails, maps, laughter, gifts, misunderstandings, alliances, a long, slow conversation with the world. And it worked. For a time. Then the tides changed. China turned away. The ocean swallowed your fleet. The names faded. The scrolls crumbled. But you became myth. And from myth, you became mirror. A reflection of what a nation, what a person could be at their best. Brave, generous, curious, human. They say you had no children, but every sailor who dares the unknown, that's your heir. Every child who asks what's past the map's edge, that's your descendant. Every person who believes that travel can be a form of respect, that's your legacy. You taught the world that exploration doesn't have to mean conquest, that understanding is a kind of victory, and that sometimes the softest footprint leaves the deepest mark. You were never meant to be remembered, and yet here we are, centuries later, still sailing in your wake. So now, let's ease out of this story together. Picture the sea again. Soft now. No storms, just moonlight dancing on slow-moving waves. You're on the deck of a ship. It's night. The sails are down. The anchor's dropped. The only sound is the creak of ropes and the occasional flap of canvas catching the breeze. You lean against the railing and breathe. There's no rush, no empire waiting, no court to impress, just stars overhead and the scent of salt in the air. Somewhere far below, the bones of old ships rest. Silent, scattered, forgotten by most, but not by you, because now you've walked their decks, seen their banners, heard the voice of a man who changed history by refusing to conquer it. Zheng He isn't here anymore, but somehow, he still is. His footprints are on every deck that chases the horizon. His breath is in the sails of every ship that leaves harbor in peace. And in the quiet moments when the world softens and the wind is just right, you might hear him again. Whispering, "There's more to see." Now, turn off the lights. Let your thoughts drift like lanterns on the tide. You've sailed far tonight, deeper into time than most ever dare. You've earned some rest. Sleep well, and wherever your dreams take you, follow the stars.